Being able to trade down within tiers at positions while still maintaining production is by far the easiest way to add draft capital or just more assets in general to your Dynasty roster, and that is the point of this video. The way this is going to work is I'm going to show you guys stats from two very similar players, but one is valued at a premium in startup drafts or trades, and the other is valued as the more generic version of that player, and then we're going to break it all down. So first up, we have a kind of spicy one. We have a quarterback comparison where our premium quarterback is currently 25 years old, and in 17 games played last year, averaged per game 33.5 pass attempts, 222 passing yards, 1.7 passing touchdowns, 3.9 fantasy points per game just from rushing, 19 fantasy points per game total, with 14 top 24 weeks, 8 of which were top 12. Then our generic quarterback, also 25 years old, and in 15 games played last year, averaged per game 30 pass attempts, 258 passing yards, 1.3 passing touchdowns, 4.1 fantasy points per game from rushing, with 18.1 fantasy points per game total, and totaled 13 top 24 weeks, 9 of which were top 12. So, do you have your guesses on who each player is? Well, our premium quarterback is Bo Nix, currently valued as the QB 11 on Keep Trade Cut at 27th overall in Superflex rankings. And our generic quarterback is Brock Purdy, valued as the QB 19 at 46th overall. So nearly 2 rounds later than Bo Nix. Now I want to make myself clear here. This is not an anti-Bo Nix comparison, but rather a very pro Brock Purdy comparison. There is zero reason why Brock Purdy should be valued as low as QB 19 when I personally have him ranked as a top 12 Dynasty quarterback. And I think a lot of this has to do with the current sentiment just around the Niners team as a whole, none of which actually affects Brock Purdy. In fact, I would argue that this offseason has been very friendly to Brock Purdy from a fantasy football perspective. Offensively, the Niners stayed pretty much intact this year. They only lost one starting offensive lineman, but their offensive line just as a whole is still pretty good, and they can draft someone at 11 overall, as most mocks have them taking one of Will Campbell or Emory Jones or Kelvin Banks or Josh Simmons at that spot. Their only real loss offensively from a skill position player is at receiver with Deebo Samuel, which based on last year, I'm not even really sure if you can call that a loss. Under 700 receiving yards, 3 receiving touchdowns in 15 games played. That is as replaceable of production as you can possibly get in the NFL. And especially when you remember all of the players that the Niners are going to get back in 2025. Christian McCaffrey obviously being the big one who can change the entire dynamic of the offense instantly. Brandon Ayuk should play more than 6 or 7 games, and even off the ACL injury, I'd much rather have Brandon Ayuk playing than not playing. Ricky Pearsall is going to have a full offseason to get healthy and to not get shot, hopefully, and they still have George Kittle and Jauan Jennings. All of their other free agent losses and their cuts were really on the defensive side, which, to be honest, is good for us for fantasy. I mean, oh no, the Niners defense can't stop anyone. They're giving up 30 points per game, and now Brock Purdy has to throw more and hopefully score more touchdowns to keep up with them. Oh no, that is such a bad thing. This is why Joe Burrow was so much more elite last year than he usually is. Why the Detroit Lions was even more nuts than normal to end the year last year, because their defenses were hurt. They sucked. Their offense had to score more to win games, and that just equated out to more fantasy points for all of us. And just to put a cherry on top of all of this, if you're wondering why the Niners let go of so many people this year, their owner Jed York said just a few days ago that the biggest reason why was to save cap to then pay Brock Purdy. He said, quote, "I don't know that, as we look at the board entirely, that there was somebody we felt made the type of an impact more so than making the decision to try to pay Brock. He is their franchise quarterback, and no matter what you want to say about him being a system QB, he wouldn't be good on any other team outside of the system. None of that matters if he continues to play in that system for the foreseeable future." Did you know that through all of the struggles that the Niners faced last year, without Christian McCaffrey, with a bad season from Deebo Samuel, really no Brandon Ayuk for most of the year, if not really all of the year, Brock Purdy throwing to just George Kittle and Jauan Jennings, that Brock Purdy was the QB 14 overall and QB 10 in fantasy points per game, and now his situation is probably getting better for 2025, and I can get him at QB 19 prices in Dynasty. Sign me up. And again, this is not an anti-Bo Nix argument. I only chose Bo Nix because his name felt like the spiciest to compare Brock Purdy to out of all of the guys in that kind of Bo Nix quarterback range. And also, they're basically the same age, despite Bo being a rookie last year. And I do stand by selling Bo Nix for Brock Purdy. I'm not just saying this just to say it. I would trade Bo Nix for Brock Purdy plus right now. I think of the 4 rookie quarterbacks who played pretty much all last year, Nix is the one who I believe got the closest to his production ceiling and now the closest to his value ceiling in Dynasty as well. I don't think we ever see Bo Nix be someone who's throwing for 4,500 yards or more, flirting with 35 to 40 or more passing touchdowns really ever in his career. And his rushing is going to help him for fantasy football, but I don't see him just dramatically improving off of his 2024 season. They can add more wide receivers and tight ends around him, and that is great, but they also probably get a better running back in there too and actually give the Broncos a rushing attack that they greatly missed last year, as they were 23rd in the league in rushing yards from the running back position, 24th in rushing touchdowns. They were 12th in total pass attempts, but they were 20th in rush attempts by the running back position. So if their offense is much more balanced moving forward, that might cut into Bo Nix's production. Again, I don't hate Bo Nix. I would love to buy him as my QB2 in Dynasty, but I love buying Brock Purdy even more at a drastically reduced cost. Right now, the difference between the two players is around a mid to late second round pick in Superflex leagues. You're looking at veteran players that could be Jauan Jennings, James Conner, or Mark Andrews if you're a contender. Maybe you could sneak away a Devontae Adams or an Alvin Kamara if you're lucky and that team is looking to kind of age down, get some more youth with Bo Nix. You could also be looking at guys like Trey Benson, Jalen McMillan, Keon Coleman, or Dalton Kincaid if you're rebuilding and you want to take a shot on them. Maybe you get lucky with somebody like Josh Downs if you also trade down from Bo Nix. Again, like I said, I only picked Bo Nix to highlight specifically in this matchup because he fit the age and just spiciness factors a lot more against Brock Purdy. But I would also do these same deals to pivot down from Jordan Love, Kyler Murray, and CJ Stroud. So if you have any of those quarterbacks, I'd be trying these same trades to go get Brock Purdy. All right, next up, we have a wide receiver comparison, and our premium receiver is currently 27 years old and in 15 games played last year has averaged per game 7.2 targets, 4.4 receptions, 66 receiving yards, 0.3 receiving touchdowns, 12.7 fantasy points per game, and had 3 top 24 weeks, all of which were actually top 12 weeks. And our generic receiver is also 27 years old and in 15 games played last year, averaged per game 7.5 targets, 5.1 receptions, 65 receiving yards, 0.4 receiving touchdowns, 13.9 fantasy points per game with 4 top 24 weeks, 3 of which were top 12. All right, get your final guesses in now because our premium wide receiver is DK Metcalf, currently valued as the wide receiver 25 on Keep Trade Cut at 66th overall in Superflex rankings. And our generic receiver is Jauan Jennings, valued as the wide receiver 48 at 118th overall, nearly 4 rounds later than DK Metcalf. So apparently, I'm into this Niners offense and the value that it presents as people are concerned about a potential drop in production this year. But after everything that I just laid out in favor of Brock Purdy, it would make sense that I'm also in on his potential wide receiver 1 for the 2025 season. And yes, I do mean that Jennings could be Purdy's wide receiver 1 this year, just like he was last year. Except this year, instead of being basically forced into that role through injuries and Deebo Samuel not really playing all that well, Jennings can basically operate the entire offseason in that wide receiver 1 role, especially with Brandon Ayuk rehabbing for most of the offseason from that ACL injury. I actually don't think that people realize how good Jauan Jennings was over the entire year last year. Through 15 games, he put up almost 1,000 yards and 6 touchdowns on 113 targets. That is a 17-game pace of 1,100 yards and 7 touchdowns on nearly 130 targets, which is essentially the same stat line as Jackson Smith-Njigba, Ladd McConkey, and Garrett Wilson last year. And if you filter his game log down to games that he just played over 60% of snaps, his 17-game pace jumps to 1,300 yards and 11 touchdowns on 150 targets, which is essentially Amon-Ra St. Brown's stat line from last year. Now, I'm not projecting Jennings to be JSN or Ladd McConkey, let alone Amon-Ra St. Brown, and I'm certainly not valuing him as such, but I do think that it's important to know just how good he was last year and what is essentially going to be the same offense this year as he had last year. Sure, Christian McCaffrey is going to get a much bigger target share than Jordan Mason did, but I really don't think that hurts Jauan Jennings, especially with Brandon Ayuk rehabbing. Pearsall is definitely a fun name, but he's far from a sure thing. We don't have Deebo Samuel. I mean, it really is just Jauan Jennings and George Kittle as the most reliable options on this team once again. Same as last year. And the reason that I'm comparing him to DK Metcalf is because, once again, it's the same age at the same position, and even though DK's on a new team this year, it really doesn't feel like a new situation for him. Pittsburgh is still a run-first offense with no quarterback right now, and he's competing with another good, younger wide receiver 2 or 1B across from him, just like he had in Seattle. He's going to have some spike weeks. He's going to be good every now and then, but there's going to be no consistency. You're not going to have 100% confidence in him as your weekly starter, and in a year or two, we're going to be talking about him age cliffing out and losing value in Dynasty just because of age. He honestly is just a wide receiver that you don't really love as your wide receiver 2, but it's not something that you can't work with. You'd much rather have him as your wide receiver 3, and if he's your wide receiver 4, then fantastic, but doesn't Jauan Jennings kind of feel the same way? Especially if his production in 2025 is similar to what he did in 2024, someone who actually outproduced DK Metcalf last year. I mean, right now, the difference between the two is pretty much the same difference between the quarterbacks. It's a mid to late second round pick. So again, you're looking at guys like James Conner, Brian Robinson, or Mark Andrews if you're a contender, or Trey Benson, Jalen McMillan, Keon Coleman, or Dalton Kincaid if you're rebuilding and you want to take a shot on those guys. And finally, we have a running back comparison, and our premium running back is currently 27 years old, and in 17 games played last year, averaged per game 15.5 rush attempts, 2.8 targets, 78 total yards, 0.35 total touchdowns, 12 fantasy points per game with 10 top 24 weeks, 3 of which were top 12. And our generic running back is currently 27 years old, turning 28 at the end of April, and in 16 games played last year, averaged per game 16.2 rush attempts, 3.5 targets, 82 total yards, 0.3 total touchdowns, 12.4 fantasy points per game with 9 top 24 weeks, 3 of which were top 12. All right, one last chance to get in your final guesses because our premium running back is Najee Harris, currently valued as the RB25 on Keep Trade Cut at 105th overall in Superflex rankings. And our generic running back is Tony Pollard, valued as the RB37 at 131st overall, so 2.5 rounds later than Najee Harris. Now, this is definitely the least sexy comparison of the 3 comparisons that we have today because both of these guys are pretty much the same running back and were in similar situations last year as the workhorse RB1s for their team, while also somewhat splitting reps with a shiftier pass-catching running back who can also run between the tackles. But if you just looked at each of their end-of-season stats from last year, they're almost identical. The only reasons that I think Najee is valued so much higher is because I do think there is a little bit of fatigue with Tony Pollard, especially because it really does feel like he's almost 28 years old. He is one of those older running backs that nobody really cares to have. And even though Najee is 27 years old, I don't think people realize that because he just signed his second contract. He doesn't feel like an old running back, but he actually is. But really the big reason for the value discrepancy is Najee landing with the LA Chargers in free agency. Tennessee is not sexy, Pittsburgh was not sexy, but the Chargers are sexy. Actually, on Keep Trade Cut, when you plug both guys into their trade calculator, it actually shows a graph of their values over the last 6 months, which shows that they were nearly identical in value all last season into this offseason until Najee signed with LA and jumped up to this RB25 value. And it's that belief in the Chargers offense and what J.K. Dobbins just did last year that has people excited for Najee Harris. But there really doesn't seem to be any risk baked into Najee's value. And believe me, there is risk in Najee Harris for Dynasty. He only signed a 1-year, $5 million deal with the Chargers, which is actually just a base $1.5 million deal with a $3.75 million signing bonus, and he does have $4 million in bonuses if he produces. But that is nothing. I mean, that contract is really just insurance for the Chargers in case they don't get a good rookie in this year's class. But I think people have just now assumed that LA is not going to draft a rookie because they signed Najee Harris, which is certainly not the case. There are plenty of mock drafts still that have them drafting Amarian Hampton in the first, or Judkins or Caleb Johnson in the second. Honestly, even somebody like Cam Scadaboo or Damian Martinez or Faisal Tutin, or even Devin Neal could pose a threat to Najee Harris if they draft him in the 3rd or 4th rounds. He could be this year's version of Rachaad White, who just gets pushed aside for a much better rookie, and the team has zero ties to Najee after this year to force him touches, even if he's not their best back. Where on the flip side, I highly doubt that the Titans even look at running back in the draft this year, or at least not before rounds 5, 6, or 7, because they don't really need it. Pollard and Spears are still under contract for 2 more years, and this team just has so many holes outside the position that they need to fill in this draft. Cam Ward obviously is going to be the 1st overall pick, and I would bet that they draft 1, if not even 2 wide receivers to pair with Cam Ward. Plus, they have massive needs at edge, linebacker, safety, offensive line, not to mention that they don't even have a 3rd round pick this year, so they have to do all of that with 1 2nd round pick and a handful of day 3 picks. Right now, the difference between Najee and Pollard is fairly minimal as a 3rd round rookie pick, but it could also be a dart throw wide receiver like Malachi Corley, Javon Baker, Calvin Austin. Maybe you still take the shot on Deontay Johnson if you believe in him, or more likely, if it were me making the trade, I would target a handcuff running back like Rico Dowdle, Ray Davis, Marshawn Lloyd, AJ Dillon, Zach Moss, Antonio Gibson, Devin Singletary even. Maybe you could even pull away an Austin Eckler or a Jerome Ford or Kareem Hunt, who could have extreme relevance in 2025, even without an injury ahead of him. Or you just take that later round rookie pick and you take a shot on someone in the draft. I mean, who knows? Maybe it's this year's Tyrone Tracy or Bucky Irving or Jalen McMillan if you pick the right rookie. The point of all this is that I am betting that the Chargers are still interested in drafting a rookie running back this year, and depending on who it is, could completely annihilate Najee Harris for Dynasty, or at least give us some cause for concern for 2025. I don't think that Tony Pollard has that issue, and even if both Najee and Pollard survive the draft as RB1s for their teams, I don't view a substantial difference between the two in terms of fantasy production or fantasy ceiling in 2025. So give me the guy that's cheaper, has less risk from the NFL draft in terms of absolutely being replaced by a rookie, and you happen upon a lottery ticket that could be something, maybe isn't actually anything, but it could be something, and you're getting somebody that's completely similar as the other player that you're trading down from. Just make the trade and see what happens.